You live from his padded cell high atop Bethel Church, the most heralded, the most despised talk show in all of human history. This is the talk show hell hates. This is Pastor Mike Online.
And here we are coming to you live. It's already going to be one of those days. I can tell you that right now. Coming to you live from the top secret broadcasting bunker here at Area 52, right next to Area 51. This is Pastor Mike, and I'm online, and I'm live with you today. And it's already going to be one of those days. I can tell you that. The software crashed just as I'm about ready to push the button. Happened before. It will happen again. It may happen again today while we're broadcasting. And no other reason for it other than four big reasons. Principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, and spiritual wickedness in high places, the ones that we're wrestling against. It's not flesh and blood that we're battling. It is spirits. Our real enemies are the devils that you and I encounter every day. And when God teaches you how to fight, you know how to fight them. You know sort of when they're around. You know what they're going to do, and you can just almost expect it. So anyway, good to be with you today. Couple of updates very quickly. Michael has, I'm assuming, landed in Kenya. He should have been there by now. And so I want you to pray for him. As some of you know, I've been announcing this. We have been dragged into a court because we did something good. We rescued 4 children from a nearly certain death and had them placed into an orphanage. We had all the permissions in the world to do that, but one agency says that we didn't do it right, we did it illegally. And that's all it takes. And so they had a court appearance, and we were represented by an attorney, and the judge said, well, that's fine, but I want the guy here that signed the papers. They said, well, he lives in America. Well, get him over here. So we had to spend the expense, money that could have gone, we would have already bought food to feed people. Would have already done that. And we're still going to. But here, this money had to be laid out in a plane ticket to get Michael over there to Kenya to go stand in front of this judge to answer these ridiculous accusations. And so the hearing is on the 29th. So what's today? 27th. So that'd be Thursday. And so you pray for him while he's over there. Pray for the judge. And I mean it. Pray for the judge. I believe in that. I believe that people in authority are due the honor that they are due and the respect. And so we are going to pray for the judge like we're supposed to, and we're just going to ask God to do what God is good at doing, and that is doing things on behalf of his people. God is the righteous judge. He knows what we did and why we did it, and we will appeal to the court of heaven for our case, and we will let God do what God wants to do. So, but pray for him while he's over there, and then pray for my wife, who will be having the first of a couple of surgeries a week from this Thursday. And I still don't like thinking about it. I don't like talking about it. But she has cancer, and there's just no way around that. And so I appreciate everybody's prayers and everybody's well wishes and their understanding. And it's just it's part of life. I don't like it. There's nothing about this that I like. So pray for her. That's my main concern, is her. So just lift up my wife, if you would, please, as we go through this together. And I made a promise to her years ago when I married her, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. And the devil has tried multiple times to shatter that covenant. And God has helped us. God has blessed us. And I love her more now than the day I married her. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind about that. So I appreciate your prayers for us and your understanding. And if she has something going on this Thursday, so if I am not here Thursday, I will be with her, because I made a promise to her, and I'm not gonna back out now. And she understands that. She understands that. You want me here. And she would say, go do what you're going to do. But I'm going to say, no, I'm going to be with my wife. And so she has stood beside me, behind me, with me, through far worse things. And so I do not mind at all yielding myself over to her and for her benefit. All right. Take a Bible, if you would. And the first place I want you to go is Psalm 68. Then we're going to go in some other places. I'm going to play portions of a video that captured my attention. I'm letting YouTube know right now that the portions of the video clip that I'm going to be using in today's Pastor Mike Online live broadcast are being done and used under the fair use doctrine of the copyright laws. And that is, I'm using small portions of a posted video, posted to YouTube. The content belongs to Dr. Stephen Greer, the UFO channeler. I know who the guy is. Some of you said, oh, Pastor, you got to be warned about Stephen Greer. Do you know what kind of person? I know what kind of person he is. I know him. He is a UFO channeler. He speaks alien. He speaks to UFOs. He meditates. He practices get this now. This will all make sense. He practices a form of meditation called Merkaba mysticism, which is a form of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah is, I've explained it this way before, but Kabbalah is when God told Israel, when you go into the promised land and see all their stuff that they were doing, destroy it. Because I do not want you doing what they did. I threw them out of the land for that. I'm going to throw you out for it. And did God keep his promise? Absolutely. He kept his promise, kept his word. I'm going to throw you out for this. So they went in and they went, I wonder what God was, he was talking about that. Well, that looks interesting. And so they learned their practices. They learned their idolatry. They learned their mysticism. And then they over the years, they embedded it into their own teachings to make it sound like this is the real God that we're worshiping here. And they're still doing it to this day. To this day. Merkaba mysticism is practiced amongst many of those who practice Kabbalah. Merkaba. It's an interesting word. You know what it means? Chariots. Means chariot. Chariot is where we get the word car from. And what it means is you are in direct contact when you are practicing Merkaba mysticism. You are in direct contact with chariots. But not, like the horse and buggy days type of chariots. We're talking about the ones that actually have the ability to navigate through the cosmos, in and out of the rings of Saturn and flying through outer space and around the backside of the moon and then down into the atmosphere of the earth. That's the kind of stuff, and that's who he contacts. When he gets into his little mode and he chants and he brings, there's actually a YouTube video of Stephen Greer chanting, showing everybody how to do it. Now, why people take him seriously, I don't know. But for some reason, he has attracted to his cause major players in the United States government who, in 2001, he was able to gather them together and tell them, you can stand in front of this podium, look into that camera, and in front of the entire National Press Club, tell everybody what you know about UFOs and aliens. And he's talking about members or former members or retired members of the United States government who worked in various forms. It was called the Disclosure Project. And he paraded all these people up there who were telling, look, I worked at such and such Air Force base, or I worked at this nuclear missile installation, and we had these UFOs show up, disable all of our missiles, disable all of our missile consoles, so that if we wanted to launch missiles at that time, there was no way in the world we could do it, because the UFOs disabled them. Now, I'm warning you today, if you are of the type who do not in any way, shape, or form believe in UFOs, you might want to go watch Sanford and Son for the next couple hours while I do this, because I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to share with you a video that Stephen Greer uploaded that really caught my attention. I listened to this. I've listened to it now about 4 or 5 times. And I've extracted some clips from it that I'm telling YouTube now that are going to be used under the fair use doctrine, which means that I'm going to play a short clip and I'm going to give a comment on it so that there are no strikes against my channel. I do not monetize my channel, so it's not like I'm worried about being demonetized. But, at one time I was taken down. My whole YouTube channel taken down because somebody lodged a phony complaint against my channel. And when I appealed to YouTube, they all suddenly put it back up and acted like nothing happened and never wrote any response to me at all about it. So I was just wondering, okay, what was that all about? But anyway, which is why we put them on DVD, and we send out DVDs all over the world. So how can you erase Mike Hoggard? Because there's copies of DVDs laying everywhere. So anyway, but in this particular video that I'm going to show you, I'm going to introduce the guy's name is Richard Doty, and he worked for our government doing counterintelligence, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a little bit and why I have some serious concerns. Okay, but the information is interesting, and the information I'm going to show it to you in the light of what the Bible says. If I didn't see any of this stuff in the Bible, I wouldn't be talking about it. I guarantee you. In fact, if I didn't see it in the Bible, I would say this whole UFO thing is a hoax. It's a lie of Satan, and you ought not pay any attention to it. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you this is where the attention probably should be focused. Because I am of the firm opinion that some very serious things are going to take place in this world relating to an invasion of this world by extraterrestrial entities. And by that, I mean evil angels. That's the biblical term for it. You can use the word alien because I also believe that that term, of course, it is a biblical term, and I believe that it doesn't apply because they are not from here. They are not of this terrain. That's what the word terrestrial means. It means it is of this earth. They are not from here. But they are going to inject themselves, or they're going to be injected into this world. And my thinking is, if you don't arm yourself with knowledge beforehand, you're going to be caught off guard. Because I'm watching this video and I'm watching some others that are very, very interesting. And they're from Stephen Greer's organization. And I'm thinking to myself, if I didn't believe the Bible, I would be caught off guard by this, or I would be caught up in this hugely. I would, absolutely. I believe that those who choose ignorance over knowledge, I think they're going to believe things that are totally not true. And I don't know if you've heard me say this. I think there's coming a day when a strong delusion is going to take place, and it's going to be so strong that most church members are going to believe it. Most of them. Most church members are going to believe this, and they're going to be willing to drop everything they've ever learned about Christianity. They're going to be willing to drop it in a second in exchange for this new set of lies that's going to be told. They're going to believe it. They're going to fall for it. And the only way that I can see that that's going to happen is that the things that are going to happen are going to take place on such a supernatural scale that there will be no way anybody who doesn't believe the Bible. What I'm saying is, if you don't believe what the Bible says, I don't care who you are, and I don't care if you've been studying UFOs for years and you think you got a grasp on it. If you don't believe the Bible, you're going to fall for this. I guarantee you God's smarter than you are. I guarantee you He is. And the strong delusion that God has picked, see, God says, I choose your delusions. God said that. And I guarantee you God is so smart that He's figured you out long time ago. And if you don't believe this Bible, God's going to choose a delusion for you that He knows you'll fall for. And you will fall for it. You're not smarter than God. You'll never be able to outsmart Him. So my suggestion to you is arm yourself with knowledge. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is a strong sword. It's a shield. We have a shield called faith. And if you don't believe every word of God, then the fiery dart that's launched in your direction is going to nail you. Absolutely going to nail you. Psalm 68. Something that I think you need to understand. You need to broaden your understanding a little bit about what you think angels are. What you think they are. If you just think they're little naked babies with wings, you're wrong. If you think that angels all look like men with golden hair, you're wrong there as well. My thinking is that as broad as all the different types of life that there are on this earth, that's how wide and varied the angelic realm is. I mean, when you look in, let's take Ezekiel 1, Daniel 7, Revelation 4, places like that, Genesis 18. Genesis 18, we have three men that appear to Abram in the plain of Mamre, and the angels that show up there, they look like men. But then in Ezekiel 1, we see that some of them have a varied appearance. That one particular cherub has four faces, and one of those faces is like an ox, the other face is like a lion, the other one's like an eagle, the other one's like a man. And they have wings. They have feet like calves' feet. The ones that we see in Isaiah chapter 6 have a little bit different appearance than even that. We know that some of the evil angels look like dragons or serpents or fiery flying serpents. Winged dragons. Feathered serpents. That's Quetzalcoatl. Then you have the angel Gabriel, which of course looks like a man. You have the ones in Revelation chapter 4. Again, they take a similar appearance as to what we see in Ezekiel chapter 1. But then here's what's interesting. We know in Revelation 19, when Jesus and his 10,000s of his saints come back, they come riding on horses. Where did those horses come from? They didn't come from earth. It wasn't your horse that died that was a good horse, so he went to heaven and he becomes one of the horses that come back. No. It is an angelic entity made in the fashion of a horse. And we know also Isaiah 13, Isaiah chapter 34, that some of these angels, these evil ones, take on the appearance of owls. In fact, practically every type of winged creature in the Bible can be seen as some form of an angelic being. We know also, both from Scripture and mythology. I was looking at this morning. One of the deities of India is called Garuda. Garuda is a humanoid, winged god. And that is exactly part of what you see in Ezekiel chapter 1. They are in humanoid form, but they have these varied appearances along with wings. We also know, according to Psalm 68 and Ezekiel 1 and Revelation 4, that God rides a vehicle called a chariot, but that chariot itself, now we tend to think that an automobile must be a non-living entity, because ours is, especially when it won't start in the morning. This car's dead. Well, it never was alive to begin with. We tend to think that. But in Psalm 68, verse 17, the chariots of God are 20,000. You think Jay Leno has a lot of cars. God's got more. The chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. So let's think about this. When you look at Ezekiel 1, you're getting a description of what those chariots look like. Those chariots are actual living creatures. The chariots are. The chariot is an angel. God rides angels that look like cars, that look like chariots with wheels. And that's what you see in Ezekiel chapter 1. Now, here's what's interesting. One of the videos I watched was looking at yesterday, and I may feature it at some point too. This guy who was a government contractor, he worked or did contract work for the government building secret aircraft. You know, programs that we now know of, like the stealth bomber. That was a huge secret up until the time the government finally admitted, this is our stealth bomber, take a look at it. Well, that was all done by contractors. And this particular guy was a government contractor, and he helped design, secret military aircraft. And he told some really, really interesting stories that of knowledge that he had that was either first or secondhand. First-hand knowledge or second-hand knowledge that he trusted. And one of the things that he said was that some of the UFOs that our government actually had, and you never used to hear me talk about this until this year, when the Lord showed me from the scriptures just how this works, and I'll be sharing that with you again today. But one of the things that he said about the saucers or the UFOs themselves that had crashed and that our government had captured was that they were living entities. Now, again, if you're going, Hoggard, you've drank the Kool-Aid, you've fallen for it, I'm not going to waste any time listening to you. Okay, but I want you to hear me out before you just totally wipe me off. Number one, God drives a living, thinking chariot. The chariots of God are 20,000 even thousands of angels. And the description that we get in Ezekiel 1, he's got a 4-angel drive chariot with wheels and everything. And remember what Ezekiel 1 said about those wheels. That the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. Meaning, those wheels were as alive as those 4 living creatures was. And there was literally no difference between them. So when this guy who was a government contractor, and by the way, he actually gave his, I like these kind of interviews where you have a guy, you can see his face, and he's giving you his name and his credentials. I don't like this stuff where there's somebody behind a dark screen and his voice is filtered out to where you can't understand the voice and you don't know the name of the person and you can't see their face. Yes, I worked at Area 51 and I did this and that. I don't go for that stuff. I don't trust that stuff. You could get anybody off the street to sit behind a screen and tell you any kind of nonsense in the world. And everybody goes, he's a government insider. Yeah, he was there with it. I don't believe it. I don't go for it. You want to tell me something? Then tell me who you are. Let me see your face. Then I might believe you. Because then you're willing to put your name and your reputation on the line, saying that what you're saying is true. Anybody can hide behind a screen and make up a story. And a lot of that happens. So anyway, what was I talking about? But anyway, this guy was saying that one of the things that they had learned was that these craft were as much alive as the aliens who sat in them. And when I hear that, I believe it, because that is precisely what the Bible says. Precisely. So I believe that when I hear it. If I would have heard something else, I'm going, I don't know if I believe, because I know what the Bible says. And I'm glad that I have a Bible. I'm glad that I have something in this world God has given us a gift that we can trust it beyond the shadow of any doubt. We can trust God's word. It's never going to lie to us. And I'll say about God's word what I just said about the UFOs. This book is a living entity. You better believe it is. The word of God is quick. You know what that word means? Alive. My Bible is alive. It's not a dead book with dead words in it. It's alive, and it's powerful, and it's sharper than any two-edged sword. So the Bible has the ability to tell us things that we can absolutely count on it to be 100% true. And I like that. That gift that God gave me several years ago, I'll never worship him enough for that. So, we have Psalm 68 telling us this. We have Ezekiel chapter 1 telling us this. That these chariots of God are actually living beings. So, if you're thinking of angels, is that they are just white guys, blonde hair with wings, think again. Because they're much more than you ever thought. Now, where was I going with that? Let's get to the video. Again, YouTube. I'm announcing to YouTube now, and I'll write it up. This is fair use of a video posted on Dr. Stephen Greer's YouTube channel. And it features, I'll let the man introduce himself. His name is Richard Doty. And as we go along, the video itself is about an hour and a half. And I've listened to it about 4 times. Some pretty interesting information in it. And some of this information I'm going to go through in today's broadcast. But here, and let's just hope this works. The technology, that is, the video. Let's hope, let's see, let's hope that it works. If it doesn't, then I have another way I can get it on the screen. But here is the first part of the video.
Richard Doty. I was assigned as a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations at Curlin Air Force Base. I was a counterintelligence officer at the base. And one of my jobs was to conduct counterintelligence operations at the base. And during my time there, my first few months there, I was briefed into a special access program involving the U.S. government's investigation and contacts with extraterrestrial, the visitation of these extraterrestrials to Earth, and the Air Force's involvement with these extraterrestrials. And during this time, I conducted investigations regarding not just the UFO phenomena, but my primary mission, probably 60% of my time was dealt to investigating the UFO sightings and any threats imposed by these extraterrestrials on Air Force or Air Force related property. I'm Rich.
All right. Now, one thing that I'm already, and I'm being notified now that our internet's cutting out. I'm going to continue this broadcast. The recording's still intact, hopefully. So I'm not going to run up and try to figure out what's wrong with the internet. So, but I told you it was going to be that kind of day. Already the software's crashed. Now the internet's crashing. It just, it's a bump, bump, bump. It makes you wonder. Let me give you the background on this guy. What he said was that he works for defense, I think he said OSI, Office of Special Investigations. and he worked as a counterintelligence agent. Now, I've listened to other interviews that Richard Doty has done, and I want you to understand that if you hear stories about how the United States government, in an effort to cover up something that it's doing, if you hear stories that the United States government is making people think that they're seeing UFOs or they're seeing aliens or whatever, he actually admits in other places that that's what he did. In other words, he said Kirtland Air Force Base. I think it's in New Mexico. And he said, we would have, special things that the Air Force would be testing, drones and such. And he said they were classified, top secret. If people would call and say, hey, we are seeing UFOs over at Kirtland Air Force Base, they would send Richard Doty over there, and Richard Doty would interview him and kind of talk to him. And when they said, are we seeing aliens? Doty would say, you know what, could very well be. In other words, counterintelligence means that they're releasing information that is not true in order to keep covered up certain things that the United States government does. Now, understand that not everything that the United States government does that it covers up is some evil thing against the American people. There's some things that our United States military does that it doesn't want the Russians or the Chinese or the North Koreans to know about. And if there was a way that they could tell only the Americans, but not tell anybody in the rest of the world, they would do that. But they can't do it that way. So there has to be a certain amount of cover-up, simply because it's what they do. So, yes, he said absolutely. I listened to an interview of him yesterday. He said absolutely. There were times when I was sent out to release counterintelligence to people. You know what? That might have been UFOs. That might have been aliens. Now, some people then look at that and say, see, the whole thing is a United States cover-up. There are no aliens. There are no extraterrestrial craft. There's nothing like that. It's all done by our government. Well, you have to ask the question. If our government has technology of flying ships that defy all known laws of physics, where did that technology come from? We didn't invent it. It was back engineered. And this is something he's going to explain. He does explain in this video. I'll put a link to this video, the original video, in the comment section of this video. So not everything that our United States Air Force or United States military is doing, not everything we're doing is evil against the American people. Some of it is, there's no doubt, but not everything they're doing. So he has a realistic job in a realistic world, so I get that. But one of the things that he said was he worked 60% of his work time, he's now retired, 60% of the things that he did dealt with United States military involvement with extraterrestrials and extraterrestrial craft. So, is it truth? Now that I know what I know from the scriptures, I can say I can't vouch for him 100%, but I can tell you that there wasn't anything that I heard him say that I can say from the Word of God, he's lying. Everything he's saying is lying. It's a cover-up. Don't fall for it, people, because it's all a ruse of the devil. The devil wants us to believe there's aliens out there, and so I'm telling you, what I can tell you is from the Word of God. I know who these aliens are, and I will tell you now, I'm working on, I don't know how I'm going to do it, how I'm going to present it, where I'm going to present it, when I'm going to present it, but I'm working on something right now from the Bible on who these aliens are. I started working on that yesterday. From the Word of God, the Bible is going to tell you who they are, what they're here for, even in some situations, how they look. But the Bible does have the answers. And if we as Bible believers cannot give those answers out in the world that we're living. See, we didn't live 100 years ago, back when this wasn't even an issue. 100 years ago, who knows of aliens from outer space? We don't think this way. Now we do. And now we're approaching a time when those issues that are out there, they're going to increase, and then something's going to happen that's going to cause a majority of this world to fall for a huge lie. And I think God's people need to have answers from God's Word. So I know this is not something every pastor should study on and preach on. I don't believe that. But it takes guys like me. Yeah, I think outside the box sometimes. Yeah, I read UFO books and have all my life had an interest in this subject. It takes somebody like me to want to know the truth, seek the truth in the Word of God, and then present it to everybody, and then it's up to you what you want to do with it. But this is who he is. He worked in counterintelligence as part of his job. Yes, he had to go and say, you know what, it could have been aliens. And you know what he said? He said, with some people, our job was not difficult at all. And he said there was a situation where a guy was taking photographs of classified drones that we had. We had drones before people who knew what drones were. And he said there was a guy taking pictures of them. And he said, I couldn't go to the guy's house and say, oh, those are drones that we have. He said, I couldn't tell him that was classified, top secret. And he said, but the guy already was convinced that they were UFOs. And he said, you know what? You're probably right. They probably are UFOs. So he said with some people, his job was pretty easy. It didn't take a lot to convince them. But that was part of his job. But one of the things that I think you need to pay attention to is that, yes, I will say factions of the United States government, not the government as a whole, but certain elements within the government of the United States, the Defense Department of the United States government, has first-hand knowledge of alien craft, extraterrestrial, and extraterrestrial biological entities. You're going to hear him use the term EBEN. And that is a term that they coined years ago to refer to extraterrestrial biological entities. In other words, the gray aliens that you're so used to hearing about, that's what they would call the EBENs. All right? So, let me play to you the second. What I did was I cut out portions of this hour-and-a-half long video. And then we'll play the video, and I'll give you my comments on it. Here is the second part of what he said.
The briefing started with the history, U.S.'s involvement with this extraterrestrial, and it started out with a crash at Roswell. But actually, what the crash didn't actually happen in Roswell. Happened closer to Corona, New Mexico. Southwest of Corona, New Mexico. And a second crash site that occurred in Magdalena, or Horse Mesa out west of Magdalena, New Mexico, which wasn't located at the same time the Roswell crash was in 47. The crash in Magdalena wasn't located until about 49.
All right. Now, he mentions the crash at Roswell. 1947 actually says it's closer to Corona, New Mexico than it is to Roswell, New Mexico. But Roswell, New Mexico is where we had, I think it was the 509th Bomber Group. That was during 1947, it was the only place in the entire world that had nuclear weapons, atomic weapons, they called them back then. And so all of a sudden now, and as part of, and this is information I've gathered from other places, as part of that particular Air Force base's security, they had a radar system array that was not equaled anywhere in the world. We had a massive radar array because the United States government had to protect those atomic weapons. Protect them from, we were, right after World War II, we're not the best friends with the Soviet Union. And since the world now knows we have the most powerful weapon in the world, we're sure that other people want it. So we have to protect that base. So they set up and establish the most powerful radar array that's ever been in human history since we started using radar. And the theory is that these, this is what I didn't really get for the long time, because I know then, and my theory for aliens for years, even before I knew the scripture on it, was these has got to be evil angels. It's got to be. There's no other explanation for it. I've always believed the Bible. So I'm just going, how is it that these spiritual beings in these spiritual craft all of a sudden now are crashing? I don't understand that. So I'm just going, I don't get this. Well, what's happened, this, like I say, comes from other sources. When these craft would come into the area around Roswell, they hit this radar array, it does something to their ships, and they don't navigate, and all of a sudden, boom, they crash. You have these alien dead bodies around. Now, again, I go back to March of this year, when I'm going to be speaking on UFOs and aliens at the Red River Prophecy Conference, and I'm struggling because I still have so many things unanswered, and I'm going, God, I got to know. I'm not just going to go down there and up there to Fargo and lie to people. I'm not going to say something that I can't say. This is thus saith the Lord. So I'm praying about it. I'm in the scriptures. 1 o'clock in the morning, God gives me a verse. And as soon as I thought, I went, that's it. And it is, and there's, once I hit this verse, other verses started making sense. But we go to Psalm 80, what is it? Psalm 82. Because I remembered this particular verse out of the book. It's like the Holy Ghost quoted it to me. And once he did, it made sense. If these entities are gods, which they are, and I want you to think about something before I read this verse. In Genesis chapter 3, when the serpent is beguiling Eve, what does he say? I even had this corrected in me, because I used to think that the serpent promised Eve that she would become like God. That's not what he said. He said, your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And I want you to then take that and apply it to who these aliens are, because they are gods. Little g, created being gods from the heavens, not from here. And as such, they are alien entities. I'm going to try something. I just thought of something real quick. Maybe I can get back online. Let me try something here. I know that, there we go. I know when you lose your connection with Facebook, you have to create a whole new connection. So let me try that one. Let me hit that button again and see where we're going. It's working. Got it back. What I'm going to say to everybody online is, I've been going all this time. I know that we haven't been online. My internet went out, and I knew it. I knew, the software crashes right at the beginning of the program. Have to restart the software and then get into the program. The internet goes out again. So there's no telling what'll happen from here on out. But I think I got you back. I've been recording this whole time, and I've been talking about this. And I've been talking about Richard Doty, special agent with the Office of Special Investigations who worked in counterintelligence. And he is describing his work with extraterrestrials, with extraterrestrial vehicles. And in the latest video clip, you'll be able to see it in the recording, he talked about the crash that took place at Roswell. And so for years, I wouldn't talk about it. I had heard that there was a crash at Roswell. Then you hear that it's all made up. And then you hear, like, this counterintelligence thing. Well, that was really the government making that up, because the government had secret flying ships that they didn't want everybody to know about, so they don't mind you thinking that it's aliens and UFOs. Alien ships. Okay. So the question was it possible, if these aliens are gods, how can they crash a ship? If they're gods, and these ships are part of who they are, how can they crash a ship, and how can there be dead bodies, dead alien bodies? I didn't understand that. I could not wrap that idea around Scripture or Scripture around that. I had no idea. And like I said, just before we go up to Fargo, the Holy Ghost quoting this verse to me. And once it dawned, once I got it, I went, that's it. Roswell happened. This guy said Roswell happened. It happened. We recovered the ship, and there was other crashes that took place. We've recovered some of the ships. We've recovered the dead alien bodies. He had knowledge of it. He was briefed. He explains that as part of his briefing one time, he was shown a film. And the film was some of this old footage they actually filmed the recovery process of the ship at Roswell and them collecting dead aliens. And there was autopsies done. The ship then was taken, parts of the material, and this has been verified by other people. Colonel Philip Corso wrote the book the day after Roswell. He was given some of the technology from the ship that crashed at Roswell. He was given some of that and told, send this out to some of our contractors. Let them see what they can develop from it. They can have the rights to it, but we want some of that technology for military use. And so, we have a standing colonel in the United States Army who says that he had firsthand knowledge that a ship crashed at Corona, New Mexico. It's told that it's Roswell, but it was actually Corona, New Mexico. Aztec, New Mexico, there was another one that crashed. And there have been several of these crashes that have taken place. And again, does the Bible even allow for this? Yes, Psalm 82. Verse 6, I have said ye are gods. And that's who these aliens are. They are gods. Not just in the sense that their technology is so far above us that they seem like gods to us. They literally are. That's who God made them to be. They are spirit entities of the angelic realm. And as such, they have immortality. They live in immortal bodies. But these particular gods did something wrong. They did something they shouldn't have been doing. They left their first estate. They left the realm that God gave them to dwell in. So Psalm 82, I have said ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. Now that passage also connects who the sons of God are in Genesis 6. Children of the Most High, sons of God, it's the same statement. They are created children of God, just like Adam was called the Son of God, but he wasn't the only begotten Son of God, he was created. And these gods, these angelic entities, were created by God, but he called them his sons, his children, children of the Most High, sons of God. So the sons of God are gods. So that fits in with Genesis 6. But it says, you're gods and all of you children of the Most High. But, verse 7, ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Princes are principalities, which are spirits. So those two verses there give you the explanation of what happened at Corona, New Mexico. That's what Richard Doty was talking about. And you see, in all the government briefings that he's had, I almost guarantee you they did not tell the truth, nor do I think they even know the truth of who these entities really are. And a lot of the information that he was briefed on comes from the aliens themselves. So, do you think that these aliens who leave their estate and come here, do you think they're going to tell the truth? No, they're lying spirits. They're familiar spirits. They're not going to tell they're devils. Devils don't tell the truth. They lie. So some of the information that they have fed government agencies or people who are like Stephen Greer, who have been in contact with them, they're not telling them the truth. They're lying through their spiritual teeth. But anyway, that's one verse. Then you have Psalm 20. Psalm 20 is very similar to that, where it says in verse 7, some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. They are brought down and fallen, but we are risen and stand upright. Two verses that tell you what these aliens are, what these chariots are. They're gods, yes. But because of their sin, God allowed them to fall and lose their immortality. Now they die like men. Can you imagine the look on their face when they're gods and they're flying around at will through our earth, and all of a sudden they hit a radar array just outside of Roswell, New Mexico, and all of a sudden they crash and die? Wait a minute, we're gods. We're not supposed to. That's what I believe happened. So he's counterintelligence agent, but is he telling the truth concerning his knowledge? See, he was briefed. He wasn't at Roswell, but he was briefed on it. He was shown a film. He was shown the film of the recovery of the craft and the dead alien bodies at Roswell. And he said there were others that he saw. Is he lying? I don't think he is. Now, if he's, and here's what you have to ask yourself the question. If he's telling the truth, what sort of reality does that bring to this world? You see, my whole point in even talking about aliens and UFOs is not so I can get YouTube counts, not so people will pay attention, but the whole point is this. If this is true, the Bible has to have answers to it. Because this is the single most important discovery in human history. The fact that we're not alone in this universe. And you see, if you don't have the Bible giving you the correct answers, then you're going to believe what is going to be told. Well, since we're not alone, then that means that Christianity is wrong. Because Christianity says the earth is the center of the universe, which I believe. And if Earth is not the center of the universe and there's other people living on other planets, well, they evolved, so we've evolved, so God's dead, the Bible's not true, and here's what I'm telling you, people. There's going to be a ton of church members who are going to lose their faith. Whatever faith they had left, they're going to lose it just like that. Because they're going to fall for this. Somebody's got to have answers. Now, so he explained that he was shown film, not a recreation, not an animation, but the actual film of the recovery of the craft at Corona, New Mexico, which is Roswell, and the dead alien bodies. Was he making it up? I don't believe he was. I think he was telling the truth. So here's what else he said.
The briefing pertained to the threat posed, the threat that was imposed by extraterrestrial crafts, and then also briefed on some other alien crafts that had visited Earth. There was 4 types of crafts that they showed us, 4 types of extraterrestrials. And they never explained to us where they got the pictures of these extraterrestrials, but there were actually pictures of these weird-looking creatures that showed on the film that were extraterrestrials from some other location different from where the Ebens came from. One was like an insect, had huge eyes, very large head, a small body. They had 2 different appendages on their arms. They had basically 2 hands on each arm. And they had several joints in their legs. And they had a bubble type appendage in the front and a lump or something in the back. And that was one of them. And the other one was...
Do you know how large those?
They were about the size of a human, average human, about 5, probably between 5 foot and 6 foot tall. And the second one was a very tall, thin, very thin humanoid that had long arms. The arms reached down probably to its knees or halfway between their hips and their feet. They had regular hands. Their faces were very, very thin. They were almost human-looking, unless you really, really studied them, got real close to them, and then you determined they weren't humans. I mean, you couldn't identify them as human beings. They didn't have any hair. They had a cat-like eyes. Their irises were different than that of a human, almost cat-like. And then there was a third creature that was I found this out later, but at the time they just showed the creature, and it looked something like the Eben, but it was bigger. It had a bigger body than. But I found out later in a briefing I had in 1985 that was a genetically engineered creature that the Ebens made. And that was a briefing in 85 based on an investigation that we were doing.
All right. Now, this is where it's going to get weird. As if it hasn't been already. So in his briefings, he's being shown this film. And this film has pictures of 4 different types of alien entities. Now, again, I said this at the beginning. If your knowledge of angels is limited to their light-skinned, blonde-haired, winged guys, think again. Because we've already seen that some of the angels in the angelic realm are chariots. And that might throw you. You might go, I can't comprehend that. I never saw that chariots of the Lord are 20,000, even thousands of angels. 10 years from now, remind yourself of what we said here today. The reason why I say 10 years from now is this. More than likely, 10 years from now, be 2029. If we are still around, which we could be, 2029, more than likely, a majority of the automobiles on the road by 2029 will themselves be near sentient living things. Smart vehicles are taking over. We have an automobile, Sweetie Pie and I, that at first I was annoyed by it. I didn't know what it was. I put the cruise control on and going down the highway, and all of a sudden my car starts slowing down. And I'm going, what is wrong with this thing? It's a piece of junk. I'm taking it back. And then she said, it's got radar on it. What? Yeah, when you put the cruise control on, it's got a radar on it, and if it detects a car in front of us not traveling same speed we are, the radar picks it up and it slows down to match the speed of the car in front of us so you don't hit it. I'm going, oh, well, now I kind of like that. I'm used to it. We had to rent a car to get to Fargo this last year because they were calling for blizzards and there was no planes landing in Fargo. So we rented a car, and the car we rented, all of a sudden I get behind it and I go to change lanes. I don't turn the signal line on. I go to change lanes, and the steering wheel's forcing me back into my lane. I'm going, oh, this thing's broke. There's something wrong with it. Come to find out, it had driver assist. That whenever I got near the white lines on the side of the road, it kept pulling the steering wheel back so I didn't drift lanes all of a sudden. So the car was thinking for me. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because we know that they're working on the fully autonomous automobile so that we don't crash ourselves anymore. And it will come. Maybe 10 years is too much, maybe 5 years from now. But we know that they're working on a bunch of technology simultaneously. Number one, they're working on internet data technology that will allow for internet data to literally cover the entire planet and with speeds capable of linking literally every object and every human being simultaneously. We know that. We also know that they're working on artificial intelligence systems that already know know more about you than you know about yourself. They already know more about you than you want your wife to know about. You understand what I'm saying? Artificial intelligence systems that will drive us from point A to point B, and we won't have to do any of it. So, I mean, what we're doing, we're building technology that will give us the power that the gods have. The gods have chariots that fly themselves. Well, that's what we are going to have. We're going to have cars. The word car comes from the word chariot. We're going to have cars that drive themselves. We're going to have smart, intelligent, sentient automobiles. AI. The AI automobiles coming. So he's not just spinning some yarn here. That much we can already tell is taking shape right now. So then he goes into explaining these 4 types of aliens that he saw not drawings of, photographs of. And he said, where they got the photos, I don't know. But he said one was insect-like. Now, does that throw you? It doesn't me. Turn to the book of Joel. I should have left it. I was reading Joel this morning. Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel. Joel chapter 1. Look at what your Bible says. Let's do verse 3 because it has that number 4 in it. Tell ye your children of it, and let your children tell their children, and their children another generation. 4 generations. Verse 4, that which the palmer worm left hath the locust eaten. That which the locust hath left hath the cankerworm eaten. And that which the cankerworm hath left hath the caterpillar eaten. You have 4 types of insect. What's that number 4? Principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. It has to do with the 4th kingdom. The number 4 always indicates the spiritual realm. And so there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that there are insectoid angels. Humanoid of the angelic realm. My personal opinion is, for practically every type of creature here on this earth, the earth is the shadow of the heavenly. The heavenly is the real. We're the shadow of it. And are there earthly insects? Yes. They are a shadow of the heavenly. And aside from that, what do we see coming up in Revelation 9? What do we see coming out of the pit? Are they Apache helicopters? No. They're gods. They're devils. What are they in the shape of? Locusts, which are insects. So, did he really see an alien, a photograph of an alien that looked like, did he really see the photograph of an alien that looked like an insect? I believe he could have. I absolutely believe he could have. How else did he describe? Oh, he described some that he said you couldn't tell them apart from a human. Now, the verse of Scripture comes to mind where we're told, be careful to entertain who? Strangers. For you might be entertaining angels unaware. Abraham did. Abraham entertained go to Genesis 18. Abraham entertained what the Bible calls men, but we know for a fact by way of the very next verse exactly what they were, or the very next chapter. In Genesis 18, the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself to the ground. We know those 2 men, the 2 of those men, one of them was the Lord. The other 2 were angels. Because in the very next chapter, verse 1, there came 2 angels to Sodom at even. And in the previous chapter, the 2 men talked to the Lord and said, shall we hide from Abraham what we're going to do? Now let's tell him. So those 2 men in Genesis 18 were the 2 angels in Genesis 19. The Bible's given you enough information for you to deduce that that's exactly what they look like. Now, I've had some people say, well, that's how they chose to appear. Okay, read that verse to me in Scripture. Read that to me. Read what you just said in the Scripture. That spirits choose how they want to appear. It's not there. They appear how God created them to appear. And in the case of these in Genesis 18, I've covered this many times before, they ate. They ate. They got their feet washed. When they got to Sodom, the same thing happened again. They ate. They got their feet washed. There was no distinction between them and other men. And that's what Doty just described was that. And what was the last one? I can't remember what the last group he said was. Some look like insects. Some look like the ebens. He used that term eben, which are the extraterrestrial biological entities, which are the grays. And my personal opinion, my theory is on those, go to Isaiah 34. Yeah, Isaiah 34. I'm trying to remember that last group that he said. Isaiah 34 in verse 10, or verse 11, but the cormorant, the bittern shall possess it, the owl also and the raven. My guess is, and I could be wrong on this, that the standard gray aliens that you typically see are owls. Again, it could be wrong, but they just seem to have the face, the eyes, the appearance of owls. That's just my guess. And I'm trying to remember what he said that 4th group looked like. Let's watch. What was that, number 3?
The briefing pertained to the threat posed, the threat that was imposed by extraterrestrial crafts, and then also briefed on some other alien crafts that had visited Earth. There was 4 types of crafts that they showed us, 4 types of extraterrestrials. And they never explained to us where they got the pictures of these extraterrestrials, but there were actually pictures of these weird-looking creatures that showed on the film that were extraterrestrials from some other location different from where the ebens came from. One was like an insect, had huge high eyes, very large head, a small body. They had 2 different appendages on their arms. They had basically 2 hands on each arm. And they had several joints in their legs. And they had a bubble type appendage in the front and a lump or something in the back. And that was one of them. And the other one was
you know how large those?
They were about the size of a human, average human, about 5, probably between 5 foot and 6 foot tall. And the second one was a very tall, thin, very thin humanoid that had long arms. The arms reach down probably to its knees or halfway between their hips and their feet. They had regular hands. Their faces were very, very thin. They were almost human looking, unless you really, really studied them, got real close to them, and then you determined they weren't human. I mean, you couldn't identify them as human beings. They didn't have any hair. They had a cat-like eyes. Their irises were different than that of a human, almost cat.
Now I remember! Now I remember! When he said they had cat-like eyes, I thought of something that David's mighty men had to deal with. 2 Samuel chapter 23. When he said that these had cat-like eyes. 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 20. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts, he slew 2 lion-like men. This Bible is right. Now, you might say, well, lion-like means that they were men of valor and blah, 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 blah. Or could it mean, after all, these valiant men, these mighty men of David's, slew giants, supernatural beings. The giants were hybrids of who? Sons of God, which are gods, daughters of men. Is it possible? And think about it. Who's the roaring lion? Satan. Are there, well, I'll ask this question. Are there angels who have the appearance of lions? Yes, Ezekiel chapter 1, Revelation chapter 4. We know this. So is it possible then that the 2 lion-like men that Benaiah the son of Jehoiada killed were hybrids, or were they extraterrestrial biological entities that were here on this earth in a mortal body, where they look like lion men? See, the Bible's not just telling you these details just to spin a yarn. All these things that have happened are written for our learning and our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. I got to move on. There's a lot more here I want to show you. Let's get to the next portion of Doty's video.
This living ET share how they communicated with each other?
Through, I guess, well, I wasn't directly ever briefed on that, but I found out some years later that they did it telepathically.
Were there any humans that became adept at doing that with them?
Yes, there was the handler. This the Eben that lived, the Eben one. He had an Air Force captain that was assigned to him, and the captain was a linguist, spoke I don't know how many different languages, but he was also an intelligence officer, and he was able to build a really good rapport with the Eben, and was able to communicate far more communications than anyone else could. And he actually lived with this Eben for, I think, the 3 or 4 years until it died.
Now, can you imagine? I want you to think about this for a minute. You're a little boy, you're growing up on a farm in America, you're watching all of these crop dusters, fly over your daddy's farm, and you're just amazed at these amazing flying machines. So you grow up and World War II breaks out and you join the Air Force or Army Air Corps. And you learn how to fly these flying machines, and you become, this man of valor flying, missions and things like that. And now you're a captain in the Air Force, and your government calls upon you to do your duty, to be a handler to an alien. I mean, I can't wrap my head around that. Because the story is from different sources that on at least one of these, these crashed discs, that couple of the aliens survived. And I didn't show you this part of the talk, but Doty was explaining that in some of the autopsies, photographs and films that he's seen, that the Ebens themselves, the Greys or whatever, did not have vocal cords, which is interesting. When you don't have vocal cords and yet you want to speak, you don't have a voice to speak with, but you have a mouth. So how would you speak? In a whisper. Do you know, according to the Bible, that is precisely how familiar spirits talk? I'll look it up for you. Find out where that is. That is Isaiah 29:4. Thou shalt be brought down, and thou shalt speak out of the ground, and thy speech shall be low out of the dust. Thy voice shall be as of one that hath a familiar spirit out of the ground, and thy speech shall whisper out of the dust. Now, I'm not saying that that's the exact connection, but it's just interesting to me. But the idea is that all of these aliens spoke telepathically. They had the ability to speak to humans in their mind. Now, here's a question for you. Have you ever heard something in your spirit that was a lie? Have you ever heard in your spirit something that you knew couldn't be from God? You see, the Bible tells us to test the spirits to see whether they be of God or not. Because there are many spirits out there. Then they speak falsely. They speak lies. And how do they speak to us? I've never heard the audible voice of what I thought was a devil, but I've heard in my spirit things that when I checked it out with the Word of God, it wasn't true. That happens all the time. And my point is this: there is no doubt that these devils, gods, little g gods, have the ability to speak to mortal men. Not necessarily that we hear it with our ears, we hear it within ourselves. And so once again, I believe that's a match with what we know to be true. The Ariel School in, Zimbabwe, where 62 elementary school children, and many of them, we're talking 10, 11, 12 years old. We're not talking about little toddlers. We're talking about children who have the ability to rationally think and are aware of their environment. 62 of them swore that a craft landed just outside of their schoolyard and these little gray aliens with these big almond-shaped eyes came floating out of that craft. And when some of those children locked eyes with some of those aliens began to speak to them in their minds, telepathically. Well-documented case. There's supposed to be a documentary coming out about these kids. I haven't seen its release yet, because if it was the day it's released, I'm going to get it. Professor John Mack from Harvard University, who wrote a book on people who have been abducted, got him in a lot of trouble at Harvard. He was almost expelled from Harvard over that book, because they said at Harvard you can talk about God and angels and devils. You just can't talk about aliens. So they almost threw him out, but they realized they didn't have a reason to, so they let him stay. But here's this Harvard professor, well-published, well-known psychiatrist, professor at Harvard, and he's called out now to interview these kids. And this guy says, I know how to talk to people, and I know I can tell whether they're lying or not. And he said, I've got 62 kids that were telling me, they're all telling me the same story. They're all telling me that this craft landed and these aliens came out and spoke to their minds. And he said, what do I do with this information? He said, they're not lying. So if they're not lying, then that causes me to rethink about the universe that I live in. And that was back in the 90s. And some 20-some-odd years later, these grown-ups now, and this is the purpose of the documentary, these grown-ups, these adults now reliving and retelling that story, and they're going, we didn't ask for that to happen, but we're not lying. So those of you who doubt, disbelieve, don't buy all this UFO alien stuff because that just ain't right. What do you do with that kind of information? Are all these kids are lying? 62 of them interviewed by a professional. Are they lying? Are they making it up? Is that a CIA, thing that fool everybody into believing there's aliens everywhere and actually we've developed this craft? Okay, where did we get the technology to build these craft? At some point, people, God's people have to be the one with the answers, the real answers. Now, the world may not believe us, but we're supposed to be the ones that have answers to these things. Let's move on. See what else he has to say.
I was told one of our members of our former intelligence group was a Secret Service agent. He was a Secret Service agent for some years, and then he went over to the CIA. And he told us that one of the most fascinating things about Reagan was he believed, and he was briefed. He didn't see it or know it, but he knew of others, Secret Service agents, that told him that when he took office on January, whenever it was, 20th or whenever, of 81, he immediately asked for a briefing. Before the Iran, we still had hostages in Iran. Before the Iranian, he even addressed that issue, he says, I want to be briefed on everything we have on UFOs. He sat in the Oval Office and said that. And they said, yes, Mr. President, we'll do that. So he knew, he was never there when he was briefed, but he knew of it. I went to Washington to get an award for something I did, which is still somewhat classified, and I met the president. I never talked to him about this subject, but he knew something because he said to me, I know you work on some very interesting things out there. And that's all he said. We didn't go, I didn't have a whole lot of time. We were in the Oval Office for, maybe 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it was. And he gave me something, and he gave me presidential cufflinks. But and I knew I knew what he was talking about. He never actually said anything, but I knew that he knew, which was nice because you recognize, you think, wow, what you're doing, what I'm doing out there is being briefed all the way up.
Let me give you some background on this. 1979, Iran storms the United States embassy in Tehran and takes hostages. Was it 78 or 79? One of those two. But anyway, 52 American hostages. If you remember, they had negotiated the release, but they weren't going to release them under Carter. They were going to release them under Reagan. So here's what he was saying, that Ronald Reagan believed in the whole UFO thing. And he was getting this information from a former Secret Serviceman who is now CIA, who said, January 20th, 1981, Reagan takes the oath of office. He gives his speech. Congratulations, you're the president. Shakes hands, waves at everybody, goes into the White House, sits down, and before he wants to know about the hostages in Iran, he says the first thing that Ronald Reagan does as president is, I want to be briefed on everything you know about UFOs. Now, why is this important? Cut to Ronald Reagan standing in front addressing the United Nations. There was a video. You can look this up on YouTube and watch what he said. Ronald Reagan made this speech, and his words, you're going, did he know something? And that's what Doty was saying. Doty went to the White House to get an award. He got a pair of presidential cufflinks as an award for something that he did. He said it's still classified, so I can't talk about it. But he said President Reagan shook his hand and said, I hear you've been doing some pretty interesting things. Wink, 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 hint, hint, hint. Ronald Reagan stood in front of the United Nations and said, and basically this is toward the tail end of the Cold War. He says, I wonder how all of our nations would respond if all of a sudden we received a threat from outside of this planet, from some extraterrestrial force. That's what he said. Now, there are some who believe, and if what Doty said is true, I would go along with this. If you remember, one of Reagan's big things that he wanted to do during his presidency was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI. That was called the Star Wars program. Star Wars program. What? Why? Reagan wanted to put weapons in orbit. Most people thought that it was going to be weapons aimed at the Russians, or that it was going to be weapons that would be able to shoot down a Russian missile. And this was a big bone of contention between Ronald Reagan and the Soviet Union. The Soviets balked immediately at this. They said, you're not going to put weapons in space. You're going to start a war. No, Reagan said, no, I'm going to prevent a war. So, in other words, we're going to put weapons up in space. That way, if the Soviets launch an intercontinental ICBM, if the Russians launch an ICBM, we'll be able to knock it down before it hits anything in the United States. And the Soviets said, you're going to start a war that way. What if the Star Wars program, Strategic Defense Initiative, was not to stop the Russians, but that it was to stop some form of extraterrestrial? You see, there are those who have worked in high-level places in the Pentagon, the United States government, that recognize that since we don't really know, we're not all Stephen Greers. We don't all think that these aliens are such a good idea for planet Earth. And I'm one of them. Somebody say amen. That they actually represent a threat, not just to the United States of America, but to the world. And they do. You see, the problem is these devils have convinced enough key people that they're not here to hurt us. They're here, quote unquote, to save us. They actually believe that these aliens are going to be man's saviors. Listen to what else Doty had to say.
I saw one, what I would refer, nobody actually told me it was an anti-gravity craft, but the way it was operating and the way it could lift up by itself, we watched it. It had to be. I don't know what else. I'm not a technical guy, but I could look at it, and just common sense tells me this thing was anti-gravity. But I think that craft was an actually alien craft. I don't think that was a reverse engineered. There's two different complexes out there. There's one that I believe Lazar was talking about with the alien crafts, and then there's an entirely different area for the reverse engineering craft. They're not together at all. They're not in the same hangar. They're not next to each other. They're in different locations. The underground crafts, the underground facility housed the extraterrestrial crafts. The above ground facilities and the far end of the complex housed the reverse engineered aircraft. They had the bodies of all sorts of different types of crafts that they were manufacturing or testing that he put together and try to fly it. Had a lot of crashes out there. So a lot of these things didn't work, but they had those. But I know I read a book where it says everything was in one hangar and that's not true. They were all separated, and they had different people. It was compartmented. They had people over here dealing with those extraterrestrial crafts, and they had people over there that were dealing with the reverse engineering craft. Now, the material, the information came through a third party, bunch of people, scientists here, who would feed it out to there. Those people didn't have access to them, and they didn't have access to the other one.
Did you ever see any of the ET craft when you were there in the underground?
Yes. I saw two. The one that defied gravity, which no one ever told me it was an ET.
Can you describe it?
It was a oval shape. It wasn't very big. It was probably 10 feet by 20 feet. It wasn't very big. It had, I think, legs or landing gear that we had put on it because they didn't fit the structure of that craft. And it had these portholes that were almost fluid-like. You look at it and it looked like you're looking through water, if you know what I'm talking about. And I never saw the inside of it, but I only saw the outside. And I saw another craft, a huge craft, that was in the Papoose complex. When you first go down into it, the first bay area on the right-hand side, huge craft, probably 100 foot by 100 foot. I was never told what that was, but it looks like an older craft that had crashed, and because there was damage on it. But the skin of it and everything looked strange. Didn't look like something we would have built.
Now, one of the things I've done while I'm watching him being interviewed, he's being interviewed by Dr. Stephen Greer. One of the things I've done is I've watched his body language, I've watched his eyes. And you can watch like Judge Judy. Watch Judge Judy and watch the people that she talks to. Judge Judy will always say, no, don't look at the floor, look at me. And what she means by, you talk to anybody in law enforcement, talk to anybody who knows how to read body language. When you're asked a question and you're going to tell the truth, you're retrieving information, you're doing what I'm doing now. You're retrieving information, your eyes, because the left part of your brain is the logical center of your brain. It's where the facts, it's where 2 + 2 = 4, and where all the data files are, and all your notes and everything like that. When you're telling the truth, generally people look up and to the right because their mind is accessing facts remembered. When somebody's telling the truth about something, when people lie, A lot of times they look down to the left, and that's why Judge Judy will say, don't look at the floor down there, look at me. Because she knows they're lying. Because the right side of your brain deals with, and I'm looking up now because I'm thinking about what I know. The right side of your brain draws pictures. It's the creative parts, where poetry comes from. It's where abstract ideas are. When we lie, we have to draw a picture of it in our mind first before we can tell it. We have to see what it looks like. Then we can describe it. And generally, when you lie, you down and to the left. I watched his eyes as he was, Greer asked him, was there any kind of craft there? And he's going, yeah. And can you describe this one craft? Yeah, it had window. And he's describing what he remembers. He's not drawing a picture first to make it up. And at one point he mentioned, now what he's talking about Area 51. Area 51, the whole reason why you know about Area 51. And he mentioned the name in here, Robert Lazar. Now, if you go to Netflix, if you have Netflix, there is a documentary. You can go to iTunes, you can rent it, you can buy it. I have a copy of it. It was a documentary done about Robert Lazar. Robert Lazar was the first guy ever in human history. Came out 88, 7, something. I'm looking up here, so I'm accessing information, trying to remember. Anyway, he came out in the late 80s. He worked in an area of Area 51 called S4. And he decided he didn't want to work there anymore. And he left, and they told him, if you ever tell anybody about this place, we'll erase you and we can cause big problems for you. So Lazar thought it best to protect himself. So he went to George Knapp, who was an investigative reporter at KLAS, I think in Las Vegas, and he was interviewed in silhouette. He didn't give his real name. He gave the name of his boss, Dennis, and he said, I work in an area called Area 51. I work in a part of that called S4, and we have recovered alien craft out there. Bob Lazar is the first person to ever say the word Area 51 in public. Everything that we've ever heard then from Area 54 started at that exact point. Then Lazar came out and he's, made some videos. He gave extensive talks about what he saw there at S4. And that's what Doty just said. He said it's the area Lazar is talking about. And Lazar said that he worked at a place that was basically inside of a mountain, underground. And he said from the outside, from 100 yards away, you would never know it was there. It's these hangar doors that have been made to look like the side of the mountain. It's covered with sand and rocks, everything like that. All of a sudden, this hangar door opens, and inside these 9 hangars, he said, we have 9 recovered alien craft. And Doty was saying that there is another section to this, above ground, a hangar, where we have American-built craft based upon the reverse-engineered technology. So the reason why I played that clip for you was twofold. Number one, if you go back and watch this, watch his eyes. His eyes are accessing data that he personally knows, not something that he is asked a question and he's drawing a picture so he can make it up. Now, either he's really good or he's telling the truth. You decide. But he mentioned Lazar because what he was saying was Bob Lazar's telling the truth. And if you go watch this documentary and you understand, or you watch, a guy sent me a thumb drive with a ton of stuff about Bob Lazar, and it's some of the videos and stuff that he made, and he's describing the back-engineered alien spacecraft that he personally worked on. Lazar's not lying. Lazar's been telling this now. Lazar's whole life was erased because when George Knapp went to find out if Lazar was telling the truth or not, he started making phone calls. There's not even the hospital that Lazar was born in doesn't have a record of him. Now, the guy was born somewhere. Why isn't there a record of him somewhere? The place that he said he worked for, the company he worked for, forgot who it was. But all of a sudden, they say nobody like that has ever worked here. Well, George Knapp found an office directory, phone directory, with Lazar's name and phone number in it. And he said, I've got a directory here with Lazar's phone number in it. So you're lying. He worked there. But they erased his whole life history. Okay? Including where he went to college, including where he went to high school. No records can be found anywhere of this guy. So all of a sudden, Knapp's going, something ain't right here, because the guy has to exist somewhere. So he was erased. Lazar's been raided multiple times by the U.S. government, looking for something that they've never found. Lazar says he has element 115. That's what powered the spaceship, or that's what he was told powered the spaceship. He has it somewhere. He's not telling anybody where it is, and so on. So there's just a lot of things there that I think, and I'm running out of time here, but let me play this last clip for you.
Well, they were trying to, I think Sandia Labs had a project, had funding to delve into this time travel, whether you could go back in time or forward in time. And they built facilities out there to test different things. Huge magnets. I think they had one of the underground magnets, and they were shooting lasers and things through them, trying to open up a fabric of space in order to do time travel. And I watched a number of those things. I was briefed on a counterintelligence project out there, but I don't know whatever the outcome of it was. I don't know if they ever figured it out or not.
How about any experiments that you
Whoops. I wasn't done. Hang on, let me finish it.
hear of or come across experiments dealing with so-called teleportation or moving across space in a nonlinear way?
That was part of this project that they were doing out there. They actually, I think, teleported something from one end of a table to the other. I think that's the best they ever did. But and maybe that's all I know. Maybe they did more that I wasn't aware of.
But you had knowledge of that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I actually saw a craft flying above Groom Lake that did things that you couldn't do with a conventional aircraft. Speeding, going 1,400 miles an hour and stopping and changing angles, and then going straight up and stopping and coming back down. And this was a big aircraft. This was one of these oval-shaped alien crafts that they were testing out there. And this was in '87. I don't, you can look at it and you could just tell, but just conventionally, because common sense tells you that how do they do this stuff? It can't be a conventional craft. They can't use conventional means to do this. It has to be anti-gravity or something, because it would kill a pilot. I mean, I had a pilot standing next to me who had been a fighter pilot for years, flew F-106s, and he told me there's no way in the world a pilot could have survived that.
The G-force.
The G-forces, yeah. And stopping. He said, accelerating isn't bad, but you got to stop. When you stop, it's going to break your body to pieces.
Oh, yeah. Your nose will, your brains will come out of your nose.
Exactly, yeah.
I know this.
So that's one of the weird things I saw that just not explainable. I can't figure out it.
Were there human pilots on board? Or
I never saw it land, so I don't know. I don't know
Did you
if
ever
there was
meet an Air Force pilot who piloted them?
only the Cash Landrum. I actually interviewed him.
Oh, you did?
There were 4 of them. I mean, the two pilots. There was a systems officer that was handling the equipment, and then there was I can't remember what the 4th person did. He was a navigator or what he was, and I interviewed them, and everything that could have gone wrong. It took off fine from Nevada and flew perfectly, but when they
headed?
it was going to an air base. I can't remember which air base it was. Some air base in Texas. I think it was Webb Air Force Base in Big Springs, I think it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Webb. And when they tried to slow it down, that's when the problems happened. And then they cut power, and so many things went wrong that they almost crashed. They called for rescue helicopters because they thought we would have crashed. So these helicopters came out, but they finally got it going again, and they landed at some place. Apparently it was just past where they spurred all this radiation on those 2 or 3 people, or however many it were. And then they flew it back to Nevada. It was.
Let me explain what he's talking about. He mentioned that, he was asked, have you ever met one of the pilots? And he said the Cash Landrum event. And very quickly, I'm going to put something on the screen. Let's see here. There it is. If you go to YouTube, type this in, Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, Season 3, Episode 18, full episode. These 2 women in the car, and they had one of the ladies' grandson in the back in Texas. They see this diamond-shaped UFO over the road, and it's spewing stuff out like fire. They get out, and the car heats up real bad. Anyway, the bottom line is the lady that got out of the car, she ended up nearly dying with radiation poisoning. And what Doty was saying was he knew the pilot. They had a back-engineered alien craft, took off from Nevada, was going to land in Texas, which is where these 2 ladies are, and this boy who saw this. And they said the movement part wasn't a problem. It's when they tried to slow the thing down that they had problems. They had a alien ship. It's an alien ship, but they used a American-made nuclear energy device for it, and it was spewed radiation all over this lady. And you can look that up on YouTube. You can watch this particular episode of that. But that's what he was talking about. He was talking about teleportation. He was talking about time travel. Now, the book of Daniel tells us that one of the things that the Antichrist wants to do is it says that he wants to change, he will seek to change times and laws. And they will be given into his hand. Now, what does all that mean? I don't know. But we know that one of the things they want to do with quantum physics is to see if travel in time or the alteration of time can be done. We're dealing with things that only God should do, not men. Men will mess it up every time. And so, there's a lot. I mean, you go watch the full interview Dr. Stephen Greer did. Richard Doty is his name. Try to look up some other information. I'm out of time. I got to get out of here. It's been a joy I love talking about stuff like this. But folks, I believe, and you saw his body language. You were probably watching his eyes the way I was. Is he telling the truth? Here's one thing I know. I know that God's word is true 100% of the time. But I think God's word has these details in it, or I wouldn't present them to you. If I can't say it the way God says it, then it shouldn't be said. Anyway, God bless you. I love you. You're the reason why I do what I do. This is Pastor Mike signing out from Area 52, which Area 51 is just like